Steve, we're going to have you cue it up, kick it off today with the story you wrote about cloud versus on-prem.
Sure, sure. Well, as I recall, one of the reasons we didn't get to my story last week was we all wanted to bitch about ILTA for a while, but maybe we'll start off on a more positive note.
Your bitch
So
was the
yeah,
word, but
I talked to David Carnes, who's with CasePoint, which is a cloud-based e-discovery provider, and I've known David for a while. He's always got an interesting take on stuff, and this his take on the lasting legacy coming out of the pandemic was sort of interesting. His view was that the cloud is now going to be the norm. That on-prem is pretty much dead, but not because of accessibility, the ability to work out of the office, or efficiency, because we can do more things faster. His view is, and he had a quote that I think was in my article. He said that people come for efficiency but stay for AI. His view is that the ability to leverage artificial intelligence and analytics for those people that use a sophisticated cloud provider like CasePoint is going to provide so many advantages and be such a catalyst for more analytics and more sophisticated analysis, that's going to be sort of the lasting legacy. And I think it's kind of interesting talking about it this week, now that we seem to be coming out of the pandemic, and the discussions are more and more about what's remote work going to be like, and what are firms going to expect about coming back to the office. And it may well be that while it's the focus of the debate, David may very well be right that it'll become a sort of a so what, and really the issue is what can we now do with cloud-based services that on-prem couldn't provide. And I thought it was kind of just an interesting discussion, because I hadn't really thought about it that way. I'd been more focusing on, we got remote work and everybody's going to want to work from home or work from wherever, and that may be looking at the cloud as an analytical source of material more than anything else. So that was my take.
But I highlighted it in my pinhawk because I think there's a lot to that. I mean, I'm a huge believer in the cloud. Our firm, we pretty much uplifted everything into our Azure farm. There's really nothing of value left on-prem. And so when COVID hit, it was 15 minutes of my senior Azure engineer to upgrade and expand our remote access. And we were in like Flint, everything's already there. And I was at a practice meeting, and one of our practice chairs, a senior member of the firm, talked about the fact that, somebody made an offhand comment about not being in the office in 6 months. It's like, okay, all the paper in your office, you don't need. If you're doing it right, if you've digitized and moved things forward, all that stuff you don't need. And I think that's a huge issue. But you've got different size firms, different size clients with different issues. As my grandfather would say, the devil's always in the details, right? I mean, if you've got geofencing issues, then some cloud computing may not be for you. When I did a lot of consulting in Canada, anything that was a US-based cloud solution, nobody wanted to touch. We start with the Patriot Act and everything subsequent to that. Nobody wants to touch a US cloud-based solution. So you have to have the stuff locally. You've got the massive firms that are not turning on a dime, that have clients that are still telling them no materials in the cloud. And I love David. David and I actually worked together when we were at Crowell and Mooring together. He was a smart guy, brilliant guy. But when you talk about things, even something as simple as e-discovery, right? E-discovery as the poster child for attorney technology usage doesn't play real well, because they have a lot of attorneys that don't know a lot about it, don't use it, certainly don't use it to the extent it could be. So I'm not as convinced that you're going to stay for the blank, stay for the AI. I mean, if you're talking about AI that's kind of like the Google AI, everybody uses AI on a daily basis if that's the level of AI you're talking about. If you're talking about AI that requires training and so on, proper staff, which not a lot of law firms have, not a lot of corporate law departments have in-house, then that I think is a story altogether different.
Yeah,
Yeah, so go ahead, Zach. I'm sorry I interrupted.
Oh, I was just going to expand on that last point because that's exactly what I was going to say too, is it's less about specifically what the technology is for me, like AI or machine learning, what have you, and more the use cases that come out of it. Everybody's looking for ease of use right now. And you see it in a lot of legal technologies where people, more than anything, are upgrading their UIs, just making everything as easy to use as possible. So that's what I think ultimately people are staying for. And yeah, AI can have a big piece of that, especially when you become used to using automation and making your life as easy as possible. But I'm not sure it's specifically the AI that people are staying for. It's more the quality of life improvements.
Yeah, I think there's a lot, Zach, to what you just said, and I think David probably would agree with you. And it is, I think it's always interesting to me that we get all these things coming out of the e-discovery field, and it's a lot of it are tools that make lawyers work more efficient, right? And it's because most lawyers bill by the hour. Sometimes they're not as quick to adopt efficiency tools. But when it comes to e-discovery and they're reviewing 10 million documents in a 2-week time period, or being slapped with a fine by the court, all of a sudden it's a lot easier to get them to adopt it. And so I wonder if, as we move forward with more sophisticated and easy to use programs, whether the fact that some lawyers have gotten used to these tools with e-discovery and more, they may make them more willing to adapt them more. Yeah, AI sometimes can be a misnomer. I really think it's more the analytical and automation and efficiency programs that you mentioned, Zach, that people are going to come out of this more used to.
Do you think that, so one of the things, actually, I've got a sort of story that maybe to touch on after this about the cloud, but Jeff, do you find that one of my things that I think is curious is that people were I think cloud is a no-brainer. Cloud has been a massive acceleration due to the pandemic. I still think that there's a lot of glossing over. What do you mean by cloud? Like you've shifted yours to put it into Azure, but so what does it mean? And also, it's quite complex, isn't it? In some instances, if you've got what I've referred to as the spaghetti junction, in terms of actually practically moving to the cloud, that's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing that there's, at the same time as we're seeing some proof, of people shifting to the cloud, and anecdotally hearing it, at the same time, there's still a lot of complexity.
Well, you trade off some things. I mean, part of our decision to go to the cloud was I want IT to focus on the business and the practice of law. That's where the return on the investment is. The plumbing, not so much. Yes, it has to work. Trains have to run on time, whatever analogy you want to use. But there's no real value add if all my IT department focuses on is the plumbing. So the more I can dig into the business and the practice of law, applying that technology, getting the use case of the adoption numbers up, the better off you are. I mean, so you're right in that you've got a whole set of complexity. And quite frankly, if you try to run your cloud solution like you run your on-prem solution, you're going to fail. You have to learn to adjust. I tell my staff all the time, we have to run at the speed of the cloud. There is no option at that point where NetDocs or Mimecast or Office 365 or Microsoft's Azure, they don't send nice, neat little emails saying that, this is going to be updated. Sure, you can wait this long and you can wait 6 months for the magical convergence of, Office and all the tools you've got and the operating system. Those days are totally dead. If you're not running at the speed of the cloud, then the cloud's running over you.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I'm trying to square
Yeah.
this discussion with that Adderant survey that came out this week. I know a lot of us probably wrote about it. The Law and Legal Technology Survey, which said, among other things, that 92% of firms said they were totally prepared for the advent of the pandemic, and that it was no big deal when it came along.
They said that.
When asked about moving
Now,
what they want to move to the cloud, the top things they say they want to move to the cloud is what? Document management systems or practice management systems. I mean, pretty pedestrian kinds of stuff here. So I don't know how that squares.
I think
with-
that
with-
report had a rose-colored cover, did it not?
I think
you
it
know,
did, as a matter of
I
fact.
do a lot of
With
Yeah.
hindsight, it
do a
seemed
lot
like
of
with
work with
hindsight they were already.
smaller.
But so just to briefly mention that, I wrote about, you were saying about it being pedestrian, Bob. So I wrote about this this company Acertus. It's an iManaged document. They do the implementation, and 90% of their deployments or implementations over the past year have been iManaged cloud, which I thought was, because we talk a lot about this in theory and we talk a lot about it anecdotally, and so they're saying this was a financial sort of their financial report for the year, and I just thought that stat speaks volumes, because it's actual concrete. It was concrete. But this is 90% of the work that we've done in the last year has been cloud, which I just thought was quite astonishing and interesting and good. I think it's the right way to go. But